Welcome back to Catholic Conversations. As always, I'm your host, Joelle Zarnowski, and this week we have Father Jason Hage joining us for Vocation Awareness Week. So thanks so much for being here today.
It's a joy to be here today, Joelle. Thank you.
So obviously Director of Vocation Promotion, but also a pastor out in Utica at Mary Mother of Our Savior. So very busy person. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here and talk about vocations with us.
Well, it's always a joy to share about vocations. Absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking of church words, we have all these words that people are like, what does that mean? So could you give our listeners a little bit of an explanation of what we mean when we talk about vocations in the Catholic Church?
Yeah, so that's a loaded question, and something
is.
that I get a lot in my work, but it's such a beautiful thing to say to people that a vocation isn't like something somewhere out there, and like if we pray hard enough, like through some kind of weird process of osmosis, then we're like aware of what our vocation is. Our vocation is who we are. So it's our deepest identity. So of course our deepest identity begins with our sonship and daughtership in Christ. So like we're all sons and daughters of God. So that's like our truest identity. But then like God has made each of our hearts in such a unique way that like your particular vocation is like how he made your heart to love. Mm-hmm. And so there's 4 states of life. There's, consecrated life. There's priesthood, diaconate, holy orders, and then there's married life and single life. And so the way God made our hearts, he made our hearts so like uniquely and so beautifully that your vocation is like the deepest expression of your heart. And so it's not what we do, it's who we are.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, thanks. I just made it all up. I thought it sounded pretty good though.
Right. For sure. Absolutely. So from your perspective as Director of Vocation Promotion, obviously your focus is mainly on the vocation to either the priesthood or religious life. That's what you're working towards. So what do you feel some of the challenges and signs of hope are today in the world of vocations?
Sure. Yeah, so it really is a two-edged sword. So a CARA study done out of Georgetown University suggests that the greatest discourager of vocation today is the parent and the home. But we also know from the leadership of Bishop Lucia and others in the field of vocations work that vocations come from the home. Mm-hmm. And so when Bishop Lucia and I did the Year of Vocations together for the diocese a few years back, he was like insistent that we really need to focus on the role of the parent and the home. Yeah. And it's so true because any vocation, especially to like priesthood and consecrated life, really is the crowning jewel of the vocation to married life. And so without the vocation to married life, there are no other vocations. And so that's always kind of like the underlying thing in all of my vocations work is just strengthening the role of the home and the family and the life of our young people. Because parents' openness or lack thereof can make all the difference in a young person's ability to say yes to God's call, because God is calling. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people say like, oh, there's a vocations crisis. I was like, no, God's calling the same amount of people he did in every other age. Yeah. But right now we just got to make sure that especially in the home on up, there's like the right structures in place to be able to accompany these people and encourage them when they begin to feel that call.
Yeah. And so with that, you're talking about how, vocation starts in the home. So obviously that's conversations from parents to their children and making sure that they're involved in the church as they're growing up, going to faith formation classes, receiving all their sacraments. And that's all kind of like building blocks. But I know that we have a group here in our diocese called the Mothers of Lou that is formed, my understanding is, of mothers of our seminarians and priests. So can you talk a little bit about that group and how that kind of folds into that idea of vocation begins with family?
Absolutely. So the story behind the Mothers of Lou actually comes from a story from the early 20th century in Lou, Italy. And it was a town of maybe a population a little over 200 people. Mm-hmm. And these mothers said, you know what, we really need to ensure that we, beg God for vocation so we have like a future for our church. And so they began to meet weekly and began to pray to pray in an intentional way for an outpouring of vocations. And just from that small town of, again, a population over a little over 200, like about 20 years later, there's a picture of all the vocations that came from Lou, Italy, of all the young people from those homes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like double the amount of like parents that were praying for.
Wow.
And it's like an amazing photo that actually sits in my office and in the Office of Vocations. And so when we came out of the year of vocations, again, focusing on creating those infrastructures for our young people to be authentically accompanied, beginning in the home, I talked to Bishop Lucian. I said, what if we created like our own Mothers of Lou group here in the diocese?
Mm-hmm.
And so we called together the mothers of our seminarians and also the mothers of those who are in consecrated life. So like, religious sisters and brothers. And they started to meet on a regular basis, and they meet over like a meal, and then they like sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament and pray for their children and for faithfulness and perseverance. And then they also pray for an outpouring of vocations in our diocese. And that group has like grown tremendously over the last couple of years since we first started forming it. And now it's like more appropriately called the Parents of Lou, because like now the moms and dads are both involved. And
great.
They had dinner with the bishop last year on the World Day of Prayer for Vocations, and Bishop was like so impressed by this group because they're like supporting one another as they try to support their children pursuing God's call in their life.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. And it's nice too that they kind of have their own little like support group in there. Like, I can imagine that there are challenges for parents
Absolutely.
of, men and women who have been called to religious life, priesthood, and to have other people who are going through that alongside them. It's just, it's expanding your family even more than just, your nuclear family in your home. And I think that our priests see that too in their vocation as priests. Like, your parishes become an extension of your family.
That's
like they
right.
are people that you grow close to, people that you care for. And so knowing that you have all of those people in your corner really has to, as priest, be something that is, very comforting and gives you that feeling of hope for the future of vocations as well.
Absolutely, because I think once we start to create community among parents who have children that are discerning, and those parents can support one another like they do in the Mothers of Lou group that we have, it's then that those parents know that, one, they're not alone. If a child starts to verbalize a call, that they have other parents they can lean on and say like, how do I walk with my child? Because it doesn't come, like first nature for a parent to say like, I know exactly what to do when my kid says I want to be a priest. Like when I told my parents, they were like terrified at first. Now they're like, love it more than anything. But at the beginning, like it's hard for a parent to say like, what is my kid getting involved with? Like, what kind of group are they joining? Like, what's going on? Like, how do I support them in these different steps? And so just having those support structures for our parents, especially in our parishes and schools, like, so that way when a young person verbalizes the call, the first person to encourage them can be the parent, which makes all the difference in that child's like ability to respond. Because if they know like parents and teachers and catechists think this is a good thing when they first begin to verbalize it, and they get like a positive reaction when they first like open up, it makes a world of difference in that young person's ability to pursue the call.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, obviously, your office is primarily focused, I think, on increasing vocations to the priesthood. Obviously, that's something that we very desperately need. But we also have a group of young women who formed the Fiat discernment group. So can you talk a little bit about how that was formed and kind of what that looks like and how young women have been impacted by that group?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's such a beautiful thing right now that our diocese has an active discernment group for both men and women. Men who are discerning the call to priesthood and consecrated life, and young women who are discerning the call to consecrated life. And so this also came out of the year of vocations that I both had Fisherman's Club, which was the discernment group for men considering priesthood and consecrated life. And then I was approached by a group of young women that said like, could we work with you on doing this? I said, absolutely. So we ended up developing this group together, and all the requests from women in our diocese come through my office. And so anytime a young woman reaches out to my office, I always have like a 1-hour discernment consult with them, just to sense where they're at and what tools I can provide them immediately for like next steps in discernment. And then I get them connected to our Fiat Women's Discernment Group, which is modeled after our own Blessed Mother, whose openness to the will of God was so profound profound and so inspiring. And then also we have a whole infrastructure now for young women, which took us years to develop, where they're immediately put in touch with the vocation director from a religious congregation present active in our diocese. They're provided contacts to religious sisters and nuns who are trained in spiritual direction, so these young women can be accompanied on every level.
Yeah.
And then also we help them get in touch with different religious congregations, like for come and see weekends and retreat weekends, so we can help these young women find the religious congregation where God might be calling them. So it really was like years in the making, but now if a young woman contacts my office, they get an immediate response, and it's amazing that we get to recommend them to a community of young women that are discerning consecrated life in the Fiat group, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's great. And to know that there are other women,
exactly,
young
that
women
they're
like
not
them
alone.
that are also discerning, and I do think that I think sometimes for young women it might seem more difficult, only because our priests are so like readily available for young men to go talk to about like, oh, I'm thinking that I might want to be a priest. Can you tell me what to do? And, we do have, religious sisters in our diocese, but they're not as readily available as our priests are. They're not up on the altar saying mass every weekend. They're not in the parishes necessarily everywhere. So I think it's great that we do have this group, and I hope that, more young women learn about it and become aware of it, and hopefully other people are offering that recommendation to them, like, yes, there are resources for you. You don't have to just sit here and figure it out for yourself.
Exactly.
You don't have to kind of be like, oh well, there's nothing I can do. Like, we have the tools in place and the resources in place for these young women that are discerning.
Yeah, one of the great areas of growth that we had was with our Bishop's Vocations Picnic over the last couple of years. We now intentionally invite all the religious congregations present active in our diocese to be present at the Vocations Picnic.
Yeah.
It's amazing now that after the last couple of years of doing the picnic, you can see both young men and women having like regular ongoing contact with representatives from those communities.
Yeah.
And they actually like are able to form relationships over years before they even get to a point where they're ready to go on like a come and see or retreat weekend for that religious congregation, which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's such a gift.
Yeah, it really is. And then, so speaking of the Vocations Picnic, obviously we have other programming that we do. So you mentioned the Fisherman's Club, which is for young adult men who are discerning, called to the priesthood or a religious life. But then we also have the St. Andrew's Dinner will have just happened right before this episode comes out. But then you do the altar server celebration, and then we have something not necessarily new. It's something that we've done before, but in a different way, coming up in December. So do you want to take the opportunity now to kind of share about what we have coming up in December?
Yeah, so the last couple of years we did a Men in Black softball game with great success, and those games would typically draw a little over 500 people. And it was like a very family-friendly, fun event. But this year Bishop said, well, I'd like to try what we did years ago in the diocese, which was a Men in Black basketball game. So there's this really cute photo out there where Bishop's holding the basketball and all the seminarians are gathered around him. They kind of got like those fierce looks and faces on, like they're ready to take on the competition. Yeah. But again, the whole point of that event, and it's on Monday, December 29th at Bishop Lettengrinds High School, which is, I'm so excited to be able to bring that event to this newly formed high school, which is so beautiful, but just to lift them up and encourage them in what they do with our young people is, this event's all just about showing the joy of the priesthood and the joy of vocations and the fact that in order for God to really make you the saint that you're called to be, like, you have to acknowledge your humanity and respect that and reverence that. And so when you see like a bunch of seminarians running around and smiling and laughing with other teens from across their diocese, because the teams that we play have both men and women, which is awesome. So they're all getting to experience like the joy of this moment. The joy of vocations is like really the joy that I love to share with everyone that's considering a call. Yeah. Because like once you say yes to God, like it's amazing. Yeah. What you experience, so. Absolutely. And on that note too, I love being able to bring it to a Catholic school this year, even though our Men in Black softball game was so successful. Yeah. And usually it was just at fields around the diocese. But Catholic Schools Office in the Diocese of Syracuse has been incredibly supportive, they've been the most supportive in terms of like what we're trying to accomplish in our mission in the Office of Vocations.
Yeah.
And so much so that now there's a vocation ministry team present and active in every single Catholic school in our diocese, both grade schools and junior, senior high schools. And that means that there's a group of faculty and staff that like their whole task is to just raise awareness of vocations in our schools.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so happy we can bring it to Bishop Ludden Grimes, because just like we talk about vocations come from the home, if we activate our Catholic schools like we have the last couple of years to say like, oh, we're co-responsible for the future of vocations in our diocese, and you as Catholic faculty and staff members can take co-ownership in calling forth the next generation of vocations for our local church in the Diocese of Syracuse. I think it's such a gift that we get to bring this beautiful, joyful event to a Catholic school, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I went to the softball game last summer, and it was like the seminarians just have so much energy, and our priests do too, have so much energy in that moment. And I know seeing the seminarians at the vocations picnic this past summer, they are so excited about this basketball game. They're really looking forward
really
to
pumped,
it.
Yeah.
So I think that it's going to be a really, really great experience for everyone to just come out, show their support for vocations, and just have a good time.
Amen.
And,
it's going to be a really good time.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I'm really looking forward to it. So before we wrap up, again, Vocations Awareness Week this week. So what message or, words of encouragement would you want to offer to any of our listeners who may be wondering what God is calling them to?
Yeah, so that's a great question. As we celebrate National Vocations Awareness Week, one of the works that my office has been about for the last 6 years is just empowering laity to take co-ownership and co-responsibility over the future of vocations in our church. And, some listeners to this podcast might be discerning, but a lot of listeners to this podcast will probably be like more of those supporting roles like parent, teacher, catechist. And I just want to tell them that like you're essential to the work of Vocation Promotion, and just your openness to be able to say, if I see a young person that possesses the gifts to be potentially like a priest or consecrated religious, like just ask, Father Charles Aponawara in Southern Tier always says, if you see something, say something, like in the airport. But he's talking about vocations. It's so brilliant because a lot of times like parents, teachers, catechists, like they might see a young person and say like, wow, like they could be like a really good priest, or they could be a really good like consecrated religious. But oftentimes, like they're hesitant or fearful to cross the threshold of like approaching the young person. They might have known for years, and to say like, have you ever considered the call? Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that all of the seminarians that I studied with that are now priests, all the seminarians currently studying for our diocese, every single one of us ended up like pursuing the call because someone encouraged us to think about it. Mm-hmm. And I think for the lay faithful to recognize that you're not just like ancillary to this work, you are essential. And when we can empower enough lay people at every level in our parishes and schools to say like, oh, like I have to be aware and I have to be praying about who the Lord might be asking me to invite to consider this way of life. Yeah. Because those asks go such a long way. And our young people, again, just their ability to say yes, because most young people would say, even if they feel it, like that deep down they feel the call, they're either like hesitant or fearful to say like, oh, like I'm not worthy of that, like I don't know if I could do that. But then all of a sudden they have like a elder who like says, who's known them for a long time, to say like, I think you could make a really great priest, I really think you could make really great consecrated religious. That's the one thing that kind of breaks that young person out of that like hesitancy or fear, right, to say like, oh, like if somebody else sees these qualities in me, then maybe it's not just me, maybe this really is from the Lord. Yeah. And so that's what I'd say to our listeners is never underestimate the role that you play in our young people's lives, especially when it comes to calling forth future vocations for our church.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we have a bunch of resources available on our website.
Yes, the website's so beautiful. And Joelle, you did such a great job making that all happen. But yeah, if you go to our vocations tab on the diocesan website, there's all sorts of resources, not just for discerners, because I definitely encourage discerners to visit it, both men and women, because there's so much on there, but also for like parishes. There's resources for parishes, resources for schools, and these are things that are like tried and true practices that we've developed over the last number of years that can really help parishes and schools that want to invest in the work of vocation promotion.
Yeah.
Like we have the tools now where they can succeed, which is awesome.
Absolutely. And they can get all the information for all of your upcoming events, including the basketball game.
Yes.
And there's also contact information for your office there. If there's anybody that is discerning and, they want to ask some more questions, they can reach out to your office and get some help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always happy to help. And again, it's just such a joy to be able to share the good news of our work in the diocese. And thank you so much for this invitation just to be with you and to share this story with the people of our diocese. It's just such a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
All right. And thank you to our listeners. We'll see you next week.